Welcome to Morning Invest for June 8th, 2020. I'm Clayton Morris. So glad to see you here on the show. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about the IRS and what a nightmare it is for many of you right now waiting for your tax refunds. If you filed in February as a good citizen, you got it in early because the deadline was into July 15th. Well, guess what? The IRS is sitting on a mountain of paperwork right now. It's been a disaster, and it's only getting worse, because with layoffs at the IRS and a reduction in staff. We'll get to that big story and what you can do about it coming up here on the show. Plus, we're going to be talking about the new stimulus. We heard from the White House this weekend about a new stimulus, but that jobs report on Friday, I'm pretty nervous about this jobs report on Friday because we saw those numbers. By all accounts, it seemed great. Then we got the revised numbers, not so good, not as good as we thought they were. But there are a number of Republicans that have come out that said, hey, as an example of this jobs report, we probably don't need another stimulus. So will we see a clash between the White House and Republicans in the Senate on this? And Democrats will be maybe a cage match, like a WEW cage match. I don't know. So we're gearing up for a battle on that and what these jobs numbers could lead us down a dark path over the next few weeks. Plus remote learning. We've got the new data on all of this remote learning for kids under quarantine, what this has looked like for parents and families who have had to try to be teachers for the very first time. Those people who never did homeschooling before were suddenly thrust into that. We've got some really troubling data about the remote learning fail. And I want to hear from you on that. What has your experience been trying to teach your children at home? Let us know in the comments. Plus, we've got an amazing story about $1 million of treasure that have just been discovered, and I cannot wait to tell you about this story. It's a remarkable story, and we'll bring that to you on today's show. But first, let's start with the IRS and the tax returns, because this is a big problem right now. If you've been wondering where your tax return is, you are not alone. In fact, 10 million pieces of paper right now, 10 million pieces of paper are sitting on the desks of the IRS as they try to come back from this furlough. So the IRS trying to crank out all of these refunds right now. 10 million piles of paper on the desks of IRS workers as they come back. Now, you remember so many of them have been working from home for so long. And this has been a huge problem. So I'm going to read you what the agency is really saying. They said they've already been struggling with budget cuts, reduced staff before the coronavirus pandemic. So the IRS was already suffering from reduced staff. It hit in March. It was given the monumental task, of course. Then on top of that, the IRS was layered on top of that, having to send out all of those stimulus payments. It was their responsibility. They had to send out these stimulus payments of $1,200 for most adults and $500 per child to help Americans ride out this economic slump. Despite some hitches like the payments that went to dead people, it mostly went fairly well, right? They were suddenly tasked with this giant thing. They weren't used to doing this. They had so many people in reduced staff that they had to take this thing on. So, like, I always want to, not jump on the bandwagon of yelling at people. I want to kind of take a step back and say, man, these people suddenly were thrust into this and had to issue all of these stimulus payments. So thank you for that. Then you had a lot of people that ended up getting junk mail, what people thought was junk mail with those stimulus cards inside. So the stimulus cards are inside, and people thought it was like a credit card solicitation, so they threw it in the trash. Then they had to try to call the IRS to get that information back again, try to get another card sent out to them. So now the government says these payments are finally largely complete, save for a few little hiccups here and there. These are all done now. These payments are done, and now we can focus on tax refunds. So let me just show you what this chart looks like right now. Here's where we're at. Because of this slower tax season, normally a lot of this would have already been done through May. A lot of this would have already been paid out. These refunds would have already been sent out. And yet they're still sitting on about 10 million pieces of paper sitting on their desks as they're coming back. And a lot of people saying they're not even coming back. A lot of these IRS agents are just basically saying, I'm not coming back. Their phone systems have been totally overwhelmed. Now, the phone number that I gave you here on the show a few weeks ago, it does work, but what we are hearing from the IRS is that if you call in the morning, you're more likely to get through. Seen a couple of different news reports on that. If you're calling in the morning, you're likely to get through, which is great. In the afternoon, you're going to go into this weird sort of vortex of not being able to get through, not going to be able to get to speak to a human being. I've seen some reports of people waiting up to 90 minutes, and they still don't get to talk to somebody. My wife was on the phone the other day with a bank. It took 90 minutes to get through. 90 minutes. Can we reverse those charges? It would be great, right? So that's what the IRS is dealing with. I mean, if you're one of these people right now that's having to, that got your taxes in early, you paid your taxes, you sent them in on time, and then we got this extension into July, well, it's going to be a while. That's what Chad Hooper, who's an IRS employee in Philadelphia, says, and he's a manager there. He said, if you got it in February, I'm sorry, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a while. You're going to have to wait a while. And the other problem is these outdated systems that they've got. You know these computer systems. They're so old, more than half of the agency's employees have been working remotely during this time. And according to the House Ways and Means Committee, about 30% of them have been on paid leave because of the pandemic. And those people that normally would staff the phone lines, they can't work from home. They have to be in that office. And so there's a hugely reduced amount of people that could get on the phones. And many of these offices were closed. So listen to your area. There's some different parts of the country right now that are going to have these offices open. So if you've been waiting on these refunds, here's the latest. Reopening is going to be uneven across the country. Major offices in Utah, Texas, Kentucky reopened this week for employees who can't work from home. Next states are, and then next will be 8 other states, and then Puerto Rico. Campuses in Atlanta, Fresno, California are going to be bringing back about 12,000 workers who aren't eligible to work remotely. Offices in other places with tighter restrictions, including Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., New York, and Maryland, aren't even scheduled to reopen. Those are the big ones. They haven't even been scheduled to reopen yet. This is amazing. They haven't even set a date yet for this. So the big ones in Washington, D.C., a lot of times when you call these different call centers, you end up getting through to Washington, D.C. So that's a huge problem. So again, if you're waiting for these refunds, my heart goes out to you. I see that many of you have sent these in ahead of time and you've been waiting and waiting and waiting to get these. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a while, and they're still focused on trying to fix some of these, stimulus issues. So my apologies on that. But that is the latest on the IRS. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Are you still waiting on your refund from the federal government? I read one story about a gentleman who's been waiting on a $4,000 refund, and they still haven't been able to get it out to him. And he finally got a hold of someone at the IRS. They said, we don't know when we'll be able to get it to you. And he's been waiting on being able to pay his mortgage, being able to buy groceries, and being able to take care of his family. And he's been counting on that money. You want to say something about that, little buddy? Yeah. Little man. Can you rest now, buddy? Can you rest? You just want to bite my chin? He's in his chew toy phase right now. Grover, you want to say hi to everybody? What do you think about the IRS? And also, one big piece of this IRS story as well is that they haven't been able to do any face-to-face meetings. So audits, no audits happening right now. So that's one big piece of this. So if you were worried about being audited, there's some things that have been triggered automatically from a computer algorithm. But other than that, if you've been waiting on, if they're going to try to do any kind of a face-to-face audits, those aren't happening. Just the computers have been triggering certain audit problems, and that's been causing people to get triggered unnecessarily. And then they call the IRS and they're saying, well, we have to wait. We have to wait to get more information. And we can't deal with this until a person gets back in the office to look at your paperwork. I want to take a quick break and tell you about today's show sponsor and how you can get 2 free stocks plus an additional 3rd stock valued up to about $1,700 right now. They're giving away free Google stocks. That's our show sponsor, our friends over at Webull. They're giving away, if you go to this link only is how you'll get it. We'll have a link in the show description of this video as well as a pinned comment here. If you go to morrisinvest.com/Webull, you will just get 1 stock for opening the account. You'll get a 2nd stock when you deposit $100. You don't have to spend $100. You just put $100 in the account, and then you'll get a 3rd. You'll be entered for a chance to win that 3rd premium stock like Google or Walmart or Apple. They're giving these big stocks away right now, and it's a pretty big deal, because if you look at the price of Google stock right now, it's $1,700, and the stock market continues to go up and up and up. So you're getting these amazing free stocks. Now, some of you, look, I've gotten a free stock from them where it was $2, okay, and then the next one I got was $300. So there's going to be a range based on how they draw them out, but it's free money. So either way you slice it, it's money you didn't have, and it's in the stock market, which is going up. And then you can cash it out and put it in your own bank account and close the account if you want. So anyway, thanks to Webull for their support of the show. They called me last week and they just said, we love your audience. We've had, hundreds of you have signed up. We really want to thank you. We want to continue our giving stocks away for free with you, because they were going to end this program. So they wanted to thank all of you for being such a supporter. That's my favorite stock platform of choice. So in order to take advantage of these 2 free stocks, go to morrisinvest.com/Webull. That's how you get those 2 free stocks with a chance to win that 3rd premium stock right now. Okay, let's talk right now about the second stimulus. We've got some big news on the second stimulus front, and I'm worried about Friday's jobs report. This is where my concern is. So my question to you is, do you think Friday's job report will end up killing the chances for a second stimulus, or at the very least, blunting the effect of that second stimulus or the size of the second stimulus? The reason I bring that up is because after we got that jobs report on Friday, a number of Republicans took to social media, called up reporters, texted reporters, and their offices were texting back and forth, and they had a few comments to make. Namely, this one that was sent to the New York Times: "Goodbye, Phase 4, wrote one Republican in a text to the New York Times. And it didn't stop there. There were plenty of others as well who basically saw the jobs report on Friday as an opportunity to take a pass on the next stimulus because it looked so good. But of course, we had revised numbers, right? It was at 13%, and those numbers were then revised to 16% just a few hours later. But many mainstream media were still reporting those phony numbers all through the weekend. It was remarkable. So all of the mainstream media was still reporting these numbers up through Sunday. I even saw them. And I was sitting there saying, what in the world is going on here? Where they're still reporting these numbers on different news channels all the way through the weekend. I ended up seeing a Fox News story on Saturday. Then I saw another one on CNBC on Sunday. So the mainstream media was still reporting 13% numbers when these numbers were revised. I don't get it. I didn't understand it. I still don't. They know that they were revised up. They were worse. In fact, so instead of them going down, it went up to 16%. Now, one of those stories was Kevin Hassett. Kevin Hassett, White House economic advisor, was on he was on Charles' show this weekend on Saturday on Fox News Channel, and they're still showing those numbers when he was asked about a second stimulus. So my fear in all of this is that Republicans are going to say these new numbers are enough to put a pause on this. Here was Chuck Grassley over the weekend. He said he's not in a hurry to pass another relief bill. A spokesman for Grassley pointed to the jobs report as a reason that Congress should not rush to pass expensive legislation responding to the pandemic. That's Chairman Grassley's Republican senator's point about the stimulus. So we're hearing from a number of different Republicans on this. But Kevin Hassett on Saturday from the White House said this about the next stimulus.
Will there be another stimulus package?
Yeah, there definitely will be, but one of the things that the president has instructed the team to do is to watch the numbers carefully, get as many real-time numbers as we can, and have a menu of options for him that's conditional on how the economy's doing. And so if we have another bunch of job numbers like we've seen, as going into July, then I could imagine it would be a much different Phase 4 bill than if we had a whole bunch of months like April. And so the president is doing exactly the right thing, which is he built a bridge bridge that basically lasts until about the end of July. And so we're going to use that time to monitor the economy and think about what the best policies are. But I'm sure there'll be a phase 4 deal because there are things like liability protection and so on that really have to happen.
Right.
So liability protection is one big thing, of course, that Republicans want in the Senate. So that's Kevin Hassett saying we will definitely have another stimulus. But this wait and see approach, which is going to then unfold over the course of the month of June. So if any of you are waiting on a new stimulus that's going to happen in the next few weeks, forget about it. Forget about it. The earliest we probably will see it probably won't be until the August break, according to Roy Blunt from Missouri. He's one of the leaders in the Senate. He says, my personal belief is that we will do something before the August break. That's about the right timing, end quote, according to Roy Blunt. There are some other proposals, which we'll get to in a second. But what about that unemployment that's going to run out soon? That $600 unemployment that's going to run out at the end of July. What's going to happen there? There is not a big appetite to continue that, but the job report underscored why Congress should really take a look at this thing and not rush to pass expensive legislation, because they need to figure out what's going on with this whole thing. And if they're going to be looking at these, so they're basically saying, we're not going to continue the unemployment benefits past July because, look at the jobs report. But the jobs report is still at 16.3%, revised up from 13%. So it went up again. So if you're sitting back there, Chuck Grassley, and you're saying the jobs report underscores why Congress should take a thoughtful approach and not rush to pass expensive legislation, I think you should take a step back and look at this more broadly and say, okay, wait a second. These numbers are often revised, and they were revised since March. They were revised since April. They were wrong at every stage. And this also doesn't account for the people that just have stopped looking for work. Those people are taken out of the number. They're just fed up. They don't know what to do. So anyway, Chuck Grassley is holding a hearing on this on Tuesday, so tomorrow. They're going to have a hearing on the unemployment benefits that are set to run out. So we'll probably hear more from Chuck Grassley and the members of the Senate tomorrow about the unemployment numbers. So if you're curious about that, I'll have an update for you tomorrow on that after that hearing, what that $600 unemployment will look like. A lot of people are saying that according to the numbers, this $600 unemployment is hurting us because people are not wanting to go back to work. They're making more money from unemployment than they were while they were working. So there's an incentive for them to stay home. So Republicans and many Democrats want a proposal that will stimulate people to get back to work. So that's where we're looking at some of these other proposals this morning, including Texas Representative Kevin Brady. He's the top Republican in the House Ways and Means Committee. And he introduced a bill this week that would allow workers to keep up to 2 weeks of supplemental federal benefits after accepting a job, comparing it to a $1,200 stimulus payment, basically, is what he's saying. And that would be available until July 31st. So basically giving you an incentive to accept a job. I think most people would like a job. If there was a job, we just heard from somebody in our chat today saying, look, I've been applying for jobs left and right. I want a job. 62 years old, I want a job. And I'm facing eviction if I don't. Another proposal is similar one. There's one being floated right now by Rob Portman of Ohio. I've reported that here before. That would provide a $450 per week to those returning to work through the end of July. So an extra incentive to get back to work. And we'll give you another $450 per week to go back to work. And there's also other incentives right now from the White House, other incentives to get you back onto the labor force. But, if we're tying our hopes and dreams to this jobs report, and you have Republicans saying, hey, look, this is an incentive for me to not have another stimulus. I mean, I'm just struck by this text from a Republican to the New York Times. Goodbye, phase 4 stimulus. Kind of like, okay, there you go. There's your stimulus down the toilet. Well, we do have a new watchdog on the stimulus program. Here's a bit of good news so that this money doesn't get misspent. We have a new watchdog. His name is Brian Miller. There he is behind a mask. The post, this new watchdog post was voted on by Congress. It passed the Senate. The post was created at the insistence of Democrats, wanted this, to supervise the Treasury Department's use of the $500 billion so that it wouldn't be misused. $454 billion are earmarked to support Federal Reserve lending to companies and state and local governments. So that's the main piece of this. They wanted to make sure that this got out to state and local governments. The rest is to help airlines, cargo companies, businesses, and also other businesses deemed essential for national security. Only one Democrat voted against this, or voted in favor of it, was Senator Doug Jones of Alabama. He's the only one that voted for this guy, Brian Miller, because they thought that he was too cushy with the White House, this guy. So it's the White House is going to be watchdogging itself, basically, which is never a good to me is never smart. But there you go. At least we have a, in name only, a watchdog who's going to be watching out for the stimulus money to make sure it's being spent properly. Let's talk about remote learning. Here's a big story I've been following, and I'm interested in the new data on remote learning for all of the families that had to deal with the lockdown, the quarantine, and trying to teach their kids for the very first time math and science and reading and writing, and trying to deal with all of this while also having to provide for your families. Maybe you're out of work, maybe you're struggling to work from home and you need peace and quiet, and you can't have 3 kids climbing all over you while you're trying to actually provide for your family. It's been a disaster. Well, according to the new data out this morning, remote learning has been a total fail, according to the data. Now, I do want to couch that a little bit because I know some families have had a great experience with it. Our family, while struggling with it, we've actually ended up having a great experience with it. And we've seen our kids excel in certain subjects through remote learning. We'll get to that in a moment. But overall, this has been a disaster. I mean, kids trying to work from home, trying not to have their brothers and sisters climbing all over them while they're trying to do this work, and trying to actually learn a new way for the very first time, trying to learn on a laptop with their teachers, trying to learn how to use, Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all of this for the very first time. According to the data, it's been a total disaster. The problems began piling up almost immediately. Listen to this. There were students with no computers at all, of course, no internet access at all. Teachers had no experience with remote learning, so not only did the kids not have the chops to do this, teachers weren't ready for this, God bless them. And many parents weren't even available to help at all. They're like, hey, you got to go do what you got to do. I can't do that. And in many places, lots of students simply didn't show up online at all. They were supposed to be there at 8:30 in the morning, and they just didn't show up. They weren't there. Administrators also had no good way of, you know how when a kid's not in class, you mark them tardy, right? I got a few tardies in my day. How about you guys? Let me know in the comments. And then guess what happened? Soon, many school districts just weren't requiring students at all to do any work at all. They threw up their hands. They're like, we don't know what to do. And there was an increased risk that millions of students right now will have huge gaps in their learning. And that's starting to show in some of this data. That what will happen is that when they come back to school in 2021 or the fall of the 2020 school year next year, that many of them are going to have huge gaps in their learning. Huge. Listen to this, because summer basically kind of started early. I'll get to that in a second. Primary research and all of this suggests right now that when kids go back to school in the fall of this year, they will be at 70% of the learning gains in reading relative to a typical school year. They'll be at 70%. That's like a C. And in math, they'll be at 50%. That's a D, right? Or an F. They'll be at about 70%, 50% in reading and math when they get back in the fall because of what this coronavirus lockdown has done. So summer basically started early. Take a look at this data. This is mind-blowing. I didn't think about this, but when you start looking at these charts, it's crazy. So, and it's not as bad for 8th, 7th, and 6th graders. Okay, this is the chart I'm going to show you first. 8th, 7th, and 6th graders. So typical at the end of the school year, see that little, with that arrow at the top here? Let's start with the 8th grade arrow. At the end of the school year in middle of June, people have, you start to have summer memory loss is what they call it, okay? But what ended up happening is if you go back a little bit further to March, do you see where that red line starts? That's where the summer memory loss began already. And in 7th grade, you see that line? It gets even deeper, and the gap is even bigger for 6th graders, okay? Then look at, this is the really troubling one, 5th graders. Look at that huge gap. Memory, it plummets. They're almost reverting in 5th grade to a level below where they started in September. They're actually almost set back an entire year. 4th grade and 3rd grade. So really the worst year is 5th grade. If you know any 5th graders, boy, this is going to be a difficult year for them going into 6th grade. Isn't that amazing? Don't you think so, Grover? He does not like that. I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you. Yeah, that is really troubling stuff. So 5th grade, when you look at that data, their summer memory loss will almost set them back an entire year. Because of all of the critical things that you're learning in 5th grade, for this to be the year that you had to go through this, oh, my heart goes out to you. My son is in 4th grade. My daughter is in 2nd grade. It's not been easy. It's not been easy. This was my daughter and my wife this morning as she was trying to do some math-related thing. This is the back and forth fighting that we had in our house this morning.
Write out your data set first.
1, 3, 8, 7, 5.
Remember.
Okay.
Remember, you're going to have to plot.
Okay.
So if you do this work again, you have no room to plot. Okay. All right. I don't want to print you another one. Okay. Go.
Look, does that look like your family? It's not been easy. Now, I will couch this and say that my kids have done pretty well. Their school was actually set up for online learning 10 years ago. They had a system in place in case of it. So they were prepared. They had this in case of a war outbreak or pandemic. They were already built for this with an online learning system. But there was actually a lot of vacillation right beforehand, like should the kids take home their Chromebooks, their laptops to do the work at home? We don't know. How many of you want your kids to take them home while we're under lockdown? And it was kind of like, yeah, you could if you want to. Thankfully we did, and because they're already set up with those machines. But so many schools don't have that. So they were ready. They were a little too eager, to be honest with you, our kids' school. They were like, oh yeah, we've been ready for this. So they were able to transition to online learning almost immediately. Even the nursery classes were able to do like dance and sing along and letters and numbers and learning about the weather and different colors and rainbows and things like that. So our little 3-year-old, she had class online. But for so many other kids, that's not the case. And for so many schools, they weren't set up and prepared for that. I know in Pennsylvania, that was the case where you had schools that were like, we don't know what we're doing. So those first few weeks, the kids didn't learn anything. It was like they were on vacation for 2 weeks. And then suddenly the schools were like, I guess we're not going back. We better put something in place. It was incredibly difficult for a lot of teachers who never taught that way before. Now suddenly they're having to change entire lesson plans built around Zoom calls and Microsoft Teams and putting lesson plans online. And look, I love teachers, but let's be honest. they're not always the most technologically advanced. I remember when I was in elementary school, because I would play video games, I was more advanced than my third grade teacher. And they would ask me to set up the film strips and stuff. Like, Clayton, can you help with the film strips and projector? Because I don't know how this thing works. Bless them. But now you're asking them how to do large conference calls with students and Zoom calls? Whew, that's tough. I feel for them. Not to mention the fact that there's no internet for most people. I was struck by this. This is about internet for Americans. Roughly 20% of students don't have access for remote learning. Look at these states. These are the estimated percentages without reliable internet connections. If you're in black here, 25% or higher. I mean, look at West Virginia, down into Tennessee, or yeah, is that Tennessee? No, that's Kentucky. What is that? Sorry. No, yeah, that's Kentucky. Down into Alabama, Louisiana, Arizona. That's amazing. 20% of students nationwide don't have access to internet. 9.7 million kids that don't have internet access. 9.7 million kids. Some in Austin, Belleville, Illinois. Listen to this. I told my wife this morning. She's like, that's heartbreaking. They put Wi-Fi wired into buses, into parking lots. So students could come and pull up in their parents' cars, and surround these Wi-Fi buses and do their classes from their cars. What? I mean, thank God they had that Wi-Fi in a bus, but really? It's why I think we should have, we should be treating internet access, this day and age should be treated just like electricity and water and sewer. We should have like we had during World War II, right? We had rural electrification, where there was a big movement, obviously, to get electricity to most of those parts of the country that didn't have it. By the way, we're still not done with that. There's still parts that haven't finished this rural electrification program 50 years, 60 years later. I think we should do the same for internet. This is a utility, and it actually helps our country beat out other countries. Treating internet, like laying internet lines as a utility for our country is incredibly important. It helps us gain traction on China and other countries that are leading us in math and science. Why do people from other countries have to come here and become doctors? So we need them. So we should absolutely, I believe, have an internet electrification program in this country. That's my thought. If we can spend $900 billion a year on defense and wasting it on defense projects that we do not need, we can absolutely pay to get internet access to Americans all across this country. 9.7 million kids without it. What happens if this happens again? And our kids are already behind 50% on math, 70% on reading. Other school districts also had to prepare printed packets of homework and work for students without online access at all, which were handed out at food drive-through lines at the schools. So the schools would print out all these packets, you'd drive up and get your work, and then drive it home with no internet access. The other area is, kids cheating. This was another big concern in the data. It's like if the parents are busy doing work, they can't be watching every little thing that child is doing and actually learning. So are they cheating by doing something like this? Like, hey Siri, what's 4 plus 4?
4 plus 4 is 8.
Oh, 4 plus 4 is 8. Thanks, Siri. Appreciate that. Hey Siri, how do you say good morning in Portuguese?
In Brazilian Portuguese, good morning is bom dia.
Bom dia. Thank you, Siri. How many kids have Alexas in their bedrooms, right? So it's hard to police that stuff. And so it's hard to know if kids are actually getting the answers themselves, they're working through these problems, or if they're cheating just by using Google or other things, and they're shortchanging themselves, having to problem solve by just using the internet. And guess what? The final part of this story, I just was stunned by this. Some students simply went missing altogether. They like vanished from the system. Early in the shutdown, the Los Angeles School District estimated that on any given day in a week, 32% of high school students just didn't log in at all to learn for their remote classrooms. 32%. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't be allowed to graduate. 32%. I know some school districts that just threw up their hands and said, we're done. We're just ending school early, a month early. What about you? I'd love to hear in the comments, what was your experience with virtual learning? Like I said, our kids, I was impressed by them. My son, before quarantine, did not know fractions at all, at all. He had to learn a whole new skill set in fractions from his teachers teaching him remotely. He ended up just having a fractions test earlier this week, and he got like an 87% on the test. He didn't know them at all. And he learned fractions, passed a test, and got an 87%. That was amazing. So he did learn new skills. He's been reading like crazy, but like PE is a little bit different, right? They're not going and playing with other kids. One thing that my wife said this morning, and I thought was really important to bring up about this remote learning, is that for some kids who feel challenged and left behind because they compare themselves to other kids. Very often kids are seeing that their friend or another kid in their class is so fast at math problems, finishes that word problem and gets done really quickly, while other kids are really left behind by it, and they feel scared because they're not keeping up with their friends. Remote learning in many ways removed that. My son is not fast in math. He is not. But if he takes his time to work on it, he gets it done, and he gets it done well. But he needs that time. So now he's been able to spend a larger part of the day working through different things in math. He's like me, he was not a math guy. And so, he takes his time on that, and because of quarantine, because of lockdown, he's excelled in math, which I find interesting. So I know there are bright spots in this. I was struck early also by the data that suggested 1 in 4 parents would say they're absolutely done with school. They're all in on homeschooling. Actually, it was more than that. It was like 30% of parents said they're all in on homeschooling. Now, this was back in like March, April, early April, after just a few weeks. I'd really be curious what that number looks like now, because no way, no way am I homeschooling. Absolutely not. I value our teachers. I think they've done an amazing job with our kids, and there's just no way. There's no way. Especially when I have to look and see this.
Write out your data
like my wife and daughter.
1, 3, 8, 7, 5.
Now, remember.
Okay.
Remember, you're going to have to plot. So if you do this work again, you have no room to plot. Okay, all right. I don't want to print you another one.
She is her mother's daughter, feisty. But she, my little girl Ava, she wouldn't be talking to her teacher that way, because her teacher is from New Jersey. So she's a Jersey girl. She's a Jersey girl. So she's not going to put up with that. So she's been mostly good. She really works on her homework and gets things done. And but anytime you have that interaction with your parents, you'd be like, focus, mommy, I got it. Stop, get off my back. I want to do my homework. I've got it. So I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on homeschooling right now. Do you plan to do it? Or are you excited to get these kids back to their proper place of learning so they can have that structured environment? I know where I come down on this. Let me know in the comments below. Take a sip of water here, and then I've got 2 more stories I want to get to today. And check in on Grover, who's now passed out finally, who was clawing on me all morning. Welcome in everyone who joined us late. That's a good point. I just saw someone in the chat saying, please, school-age children, you got to help them learn on their own. And we have been. Like trying to make sure that they have the tools. You've got to go into your room and just focus. And they're doing a great job. The first week, it was a little dicey. It was a little, Mommy, Daddy, we need all your help, we need to do it. No, that's not how this is gonna work. No sirree, Bob, as my dad used to say. No sirree, Bob. Where are we here in the rundown? Okay. I want to tell you about a fun story now. $1 million treasure chest has just been discovered in the United States. This is a fun story to sort of start off your week. Yes, a treasure chest filled with gold coins and rubies and emeralds has just been discovered in the Colorado mountains. This was set about 10 years ago. Forrest Fenn, he's an 89-year-old art and antiquities collector. He created this treasure hunt, made the announcement Sunday on his website that this thing has been found. The treasure chest that he set out many years ago has finally been discovered. And there he is. There's Forrest Fenn. And he created a book called The Thrill of the Chase. And in that book, he had a poem, which I found fascinating. That's the only clue that he had. So the reason that he did this was back during the recession. It's kind of funny that it's ending now during this coronavirus recession, Great Depression. He created this thing 10 years ago. He planted it out in the Colorado Rockies somewhere that no one could find. And he wrote about it in a poem inside of a book that he wrote called The Thrill of the Chase. And he said that he did this to get people out into nature and to lift people's spirits up because everyone had been so demoralized by what unfolded during the recession. People were out of work, people were scared, and so he said he wanted to do something to connect people back with nature again. So he did, and here was the phrase. And I remember reading about this story a couple of years ago, and I said to my friend at the time, I said, we got to go and do this. Can we go and explore? And we would have had to come up against, here was the poem. We would have had to figure this out. You put this poem up here on the screen. See if you could figure this out. So hear me all and listen good. Your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. That's basically it. That's basically all we had to work with to go out and figure where this thing was out near Denver, Colorado, in the mountains. Well, someone finally found it. So over the weekend, Forrest Fenn took to his website to say, guess what? Someone has actually found the bronze treasure chest. And he said that the person did not want to be named. And I don't blame that person. Could you imagine? You're the person that found this treasure, and you've got all of these gold coins now in your house. You're like, that's perfect for getting burgled, right? Especially during these days, right? So someone's going to find you, track you down. You've got all these gold coins. People are going to come after you, like the Wild West. He estimated that as many as 350,000 people went after this treasure from all over the world. They were hunting for it. And the reason this story was interesting a number of years ago, but even just a few months ago, I remember an update. Just about 9 weeks ago, there was an update on this story, how a man during the winter went looking for it and died. 2 people went looking for it, and one of them ended up dying. A 65-year-old had to be rushed to the hospital. And I think 5 people have died from this. And some people fully quit their jobs to go hunting for this treasure. Well, you can go back to working now because it's officially over. So there you go, $1 million treasure chest, not available anymore, no longer. It's out there. Someone discovered it. Sorry, all you treasure hunters, but you can still go to Oak Island if you want. You can still hunt up there and see if you find anything. And finally today, I want to tell you about a crazy story. I was a history major in college, and I find this story fascinating. That there was someone that we could have spoken to who had a connection to the Civil War has just passed away. Think about that for a second. The Civil War, of course, took place in the United States from 1861 to 1865. 1861 to 1865. So someone just died this weekend who had a connection to the Civil War and was still receiving a pension from the Civil War. Her name was Irene Triplett. Here's a picture of her that was taken about 3 years ago. So we don't have a current photo of her. She was 90 when she died on Sunday in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Now listen to this. Her father actually served during the Civil War. Right, can you follow me here? Her father, Most Triplett is his name, Most Triplett, served during the Civil War. He fought for the Confederacy, but then he defected. He's like, I don't want to be defending the rights of, holding slaves. So he left. He defected from the Confederacy, and he went and fought for the Union. And he applied for his Union pension 20 years after the war. And in 1930, this is where the story gets amazing. In 1930, that's when his daughter was born. So he had a daughter when he was 87 years old. Here's his daughter. So in 1930, he had Irene. He was 87 years old when he had her. Can you believe that? So he married late. So he married late, had her, and she turned 90. She just passed away at 90 years old. I find this incredibly fascinating. And so she just passed away. She was receiving a pension from the Civil War. So she's the last known pensioner from the Civil War in the United States. It's amazing. And Dennis St. Andrew, who's a commander of the North Carolina Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, had talked to her many times and said, look, Irene, you're a part of history. That you're talking to somebody whose father fought in the Civil War. That it's just like mind-blowing. I remember, I was a history major in college and I loved, Civil War history. And I was always fascinated by a story that my history teacher told me. And again, this is one of the reasons why certain teachers have an incredible ability to change people's lives. So my history teacher in high school, Mr. Vogt was his name, in Pennsylvania, Wilson High School. I took 10th grade history with him, and I had a choice then whether to take him in 11th and 12th. I took every class I could get with him because he was just so fascinating to me. So he told a story one time where when he was a little boy, he spoke to, he got to speak to a grandmother who was he was a little boy. He got to speak to a grandmother who was alive and who watched the Civil War. That she was at the Battle of Vicksburg or something, climbed up on a hill, or Antietam. Remember in Battle of Antietam, I think so many people brought lunch baskets out and thought it was going to be fun, because we didn't know that it was going to be so bloody. And they went to the Battle of Antietam and they sat up on a hill and they were eating their sandwiches and watching this thing unfold, and it was so bloody, and they didn't do that again. And then the Civil War lasted 4 more years after that. But he told me about stories how he spoke to her and she had witnessed the Civil War. And to me, that's just like this time capsule to the past that I just find so fascinating. Anyway, I wanted to share that story with you because as I read 4 different stories on that this morning, I was blown away that this woman, was the daughter of a Civil War soldier who just died this weekend, the last known pensioner who was receiving, I think, like $70 a month. So not very much, but that in modern day standards. Can you imagine being the person in the office at, I don't know where those things are doled out, like the War Office or what? The Veterans Affairs Office, I suppose? I guess the VA, right? And there's every month, or every few weeks, there's one person at the VA is I got to handle the Civil War pensions, and there's only one person. Anyway, I find that interesting. So that's today's show, everyone. I would love to open it up for a little Q&A today. And subscribe to the channel if you're new here. We try to do this show Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern time, to talk about the economy, to talk about the stimulus, to talk about unemployment and the things that matter most to you. Also to help educate you and build you up so that you can build financial intelligence, start your own business, and move in that direction. That's the goal with this show. So please, please subscribe and hit that little bell notification so you know when we go live. We've got a lot of people here. Thank you so much for your super chat. Richie Blanton says, my wife and I, your homeschool has been very tough. We have 4 kids and our youngest is disabled. My wife has had to do all of her physical training and OT from home. Thankfully, I've kept my job, but it's been super hard on my wife. Richie, I'm sorry, so sorry to hear that. Robin Lanky says, I love seeing those old pictures. I do too. Isn't that crazy? Like these pictures are of Union Army in Virginia, like just sitting under a tree, relaxing. You know, my son is just reading about the Battle of Gettysburg right now, which has been endlessly fascinating to me, as I'm a Pennsylvania native. So I'm a Pennsylvania native, and I used to live near the Battle of Gettysburg, near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I would go there like once a year. I would just drive out there, because I was so fascinated by those 3 days in July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And my son is starting to read. He reads like these I Survived series. It's a series for young adults, or not young adults, whatever he is. He's a 9-year-old. I don't know what he is. Called I Survived. Like, I survived the, eruption of Mount St. Helens. I survived an historical, Anyways, I survived the Battle of Gettysburg. And I was telling him, think about these guys wearing these wool jackets. It was so stinking hot in Pennsylvania, humidity in July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863. Anyway. So thank you for your comments. Clayton, will the BLS be officially revised and be made public? Yes, in a few weeks they'll release that. The Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers will be a few weeks. Influence Film says, what are your Vegas odds on a second stimulus check given today's news? That's a good question. A second stimulus check. I think a second stimulus check is like a direct payment to you is like 50-50. I think a second stimulus is like 90%, 100% that this is going to happen. Because we're definitely hearing from the White House, of course, Kevin Hastert and others saying that we are going to have a second stimulus, that there definitely will be a second stimulus. The size of that, I don't know. And will it include a direct payment? I don't know. We do know that there will be a payroll tax deduction if the White House gets its way. We do know that there will be liability protection if the Senate gets its way. That's a big piece for Mitch McConnell. He wants to be able to protect businesses from being sued out of existence because of coronavirus, which I support. Somebody goes back to work and they get sick. How many businesses are going to be sued out of existence because someone got sick at work? And now, oh my God, there'd be endless litigation. America is the litigation capital of the world. We don't need more of it. We don't need trial lawyers just making money hand over fist. MS Callie M. The Senate is so distant from reality. Thank you for your super chat. It's crazy. It reminds me of when Marie Antoinette said, if they do not have bread, let them eat cake. Yeah. Need a Weeble tutorial. Oh, so you're asking about our show sponsor, Weeble. It's very simple. So if you want to get those free stocks, all you have to do is go to this web address on your phone or web, okay? It will take you to the website and it says open an account. But to get the free stocks, you have to go to this website. It's our website, morrisinvest.com/Weeble. You get the 2 free stocks, and you click on open an account right there. Now, because it is a stock account, they are going to want some info from you because they are regulated. They have to by the federal government. They have to get, Social Security and all that stuff to make sure you're not fake, okay? And because when you start making money off of stocks, you need to obviously report that to Uncle Sam on your taxes, Like people who make a lot of money with stocks pay capital gains taxes. But it's far less than you pay in your tax bracket. Capital gains way lower. Grover, how's Super Grover doing? Someone wants to know. He's finally relaxing and not chewing on my coat. Summer Glarden says, we elected an internet troll into the White House. Oh, Johnny Bragg says, I just opened an account. I don't know what to do with it. Oh, you're talking about Webull. Well, once you open the account, you get a free stock. And then when you deposit $100 into it, you're not spending $100, you're just putting $100 in the account. It's like a savings account, okay? Put $100 in the account, you get a second stock. Now, it may be $2 stock, it may be $400 stock, and it's valued up to $1,400. So I've known people here that got like $1,000 stock. Now you have that account open, then you're entered into a chance to win that third stock, which is a premium stock, like Google, Apple, Walmart, like a big stock that's worth thousands. Then when you get you can keep it open because it's a stock account, and the stock market has been going up. So the free stocks that I got from them, they've gone up in value. You can do the same thing. Keep it and let it go up in value, or cash it out. So you trade the stocks, get your free money, transfer it back to your bank account, and close the account if you want. Like, it's totally up to you, but it doesn't cost you anything to have it open, you know? If anything, if you want to buy certain stocks in the future, now you have a stock account that you can use that's tied to your bank account. So you can, you know, that's what I do. And I'll buy some stocks in companies I believe in, but I use Webull to do it because you get 2 free stocks. Why not? Robinhood also does the same thing, but they only give you 1 free stock. Michael Stern says, Amazon will hire anyone, just be careful, they don't care about their workers. I know, I used to work there. Yeah, Michael, Amazon has had a lot of issues. Jackie says, you love picking out the negative comments on Trump, don't you? No, I like to pick out the funny ones. There's plenty of negative comments about Trump in here that I don't read. But like the one where they called him an internet troll that we elected into the office. That's true. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, or if you're a Trump supporter or not. Do you know what an internet troll is? They just get on the internet and troll people, right? I mean, President Trump has trolled hundreds of people, from random Hollywood celebrities to random people that no one's ever heard of. No other president has ever done that. Say what you want about it. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just telling you the facts. Do you think that that's great? I know plenty of Republicans. Look, I used to work at Fox News Channel, okay? I know plenty of Republicans that thinks he should get off Twitter. There's been plenty of his advisors that think he should as well. There's been plenty of his, like even Attorney General Barr has told him, get off Twitter, please. You're undermining my job. I didn't say that. That's his Attorney General. But I also read comments here about Nancy Pelosi. So I'm an equal opportunity because I've got no dog in this hunt. I have never been one of these people that is blinded by dogma and idealism, by like some, you know, being a GOP or Democrat. I'm a registered independent, so I don't care. I can't stand, you know, we all have like that old uncle in our family. Different thoughts and feelings over the years about this, or over the past few months about the stimulus and what it should look like. And after really diving deeper into the data is how I've made my, you know, I've changed my mind on things. Shane McLean says, I'm like Clayton Independent. How can you vote one way your whole life? That's just odd to me. Some people just vote Republican or Democrat without even knowing the views of the person. I know, I mean, what happens is a lot of people, they go in to that voting booth and they just go up to the thing that says Democrat, and they like where they can just do a straight party line vote, and they just pull that lever for their, they don't even know, they don't even care about any of, I think that that's a shame. Same with Republicans. They can just pull a vote for any Republican. Awful. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Sorry for the Grover dog earlier in the show, barking like crazy and chewing on my coat. I hope that wasn't distracting. That's what you get when you have a 3-month-old puppy. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on today's show. I really appreciate it. We went a little longer today, but had a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today in the news. So thank you guys so much. We'll see you again tomorrow, right here at 9 a.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new here.